Yeah, the sea. She's a mysterious and volatile mistress, an experienced scorned lover who at the first sign of complacency upbends all you thought you knew about foam in the waves and leaves ye gasping, your arms heavy from paddling, your lungs wet with salt water and your eyes stinging, either from the whip of the spray or the violent cut of your own dethronement. We like to think ourselves infallible, unshakable conquerors of the world we humans do, but a bad trip at sea shows us our humility, for she is a mighty goddess, a deity of unfathomable size, and we are not even followers, for why would the gods care for the musings of an ant? Yes, the sea. She is a cruel one, and yet, like Gecko the Narcissus, she calls to us, wordlessly, but as a reflection of our own foolishness and undeserved pride. Do we see ourselves in her calmer pools because it's where we have come from? Or is it a warning, a dark, self-fulfilling prophecy telling us where we're going? Only Poseidon knows.
Sorry. My apologies, everyone. I'm not usually so melodramatic on this channel. It's just something about the open ocean just draws that feeling out of me. That kind of archaic, salty personality. One that seems equally in love with and afraid of the sea. And honestly, it's sort of a genre staple. I don't know what genre I'd call these kinds of stories officially, or if they can even fit under one full classification, but even so, I'm fairly confident you know the kind of story I'm talking about. It's not your Pirates of the Caribbean or your Black Flag. It's stuff like The Lighthouse or The Shadow over Innsmouth. Stories where the sea isn't a place of swashbuckling, rope-swinging adventure, but dark, spine-chilling danger and mystery. The point I'm trying to make is, there are a couple of different ways you can approach telling a story about the sea, and in either case, the first decision you need to make is about your main character, who, no, isn't your protagonist or your hero or even a person at all. No, the main character, obviously, is the sea, and you just need to decide how she behaves in your story. For example, a couple of years ago, I played this game called Return of the Obra Dinn. It's this super stylized, supernatural mystery taking place in 1807 aboard an abandoned ship, the Obra Dinn, and the majority of your playthrough will include walking through frozen scenes of the ship's history, different specific disasters that all culminated in the empty ship you see before you. It's a super fun game, requiring attention to detail and some critical problem-solving skills, but I'm not here to talk about that. I'm here to talk about the way its story unfolds. Pretty much every bad thing that can happen aboard a merchant ship happens in Return of the Obra Dinn, including mutiny, sickness, fire, sea monsters, arguments, and execution. Like I said a couple of paragraphs ago, our main character, the sea, has been well characterized in this story as dangerous over inviting. There is adventure for sure, but it's hard to avoid in a setting like this. It's not lighthearted or comical like a scene from Our Flag Means Death, it's violent and cruel like a scene from, I don't know, reality? However, within the narrative of the game, all of these things have already happened. Our place in the story isn't as the struggling captain, or the frightened passengers, or the frustrated crew. It's technically as an insurance officer, which, for all the work the game does, isn't that interesting of an occupation or role to play in the narrative. And though we witness many scenes of peril, we're never actually in any danger, because the sea has already won its battle. Everyone is already dead, and we're just looking at the echoes. And the craziest part is, even through the stillness of the scenes, thanks to both some stellar sound design and evocative scene work, we still can comprehend the tangible danger and chaotic energy of each and every moment that the original crew of this ship encountered. But imagine how much more intense it would have felt if we were actually there. I talked in a recent essay about the feeling of wandering a place after a disaster has happened, how your mind is forced to imagine what happened, the chaos, the panic, the fear. Well, it's time to stop imagining and answer. When the sea calls, you answer it. But answering on your personal phone? That's a mistake of monstrous proportions. If you're using your personal phone number to close business deals, you're not just mixing work and play, you're sabotaging your chances of success. I work with a bunch of people for my videos, and when I started, I was always having to cycle through apps like Instagram, Discord, messages, and emails. I needed to communicate, but I was doing everything I could not to share my number. It was a mess. I doubt I'm alone. You and your team are probably using 18 different apps to get your work done, right? Well, it's time to break away from being an amateur. Let the sponsor of this video, Nextiva, cut your communication down to one app. Nextiva consolidates your business, voice, text, video meetings, and CRM inside of one app. You get seamless, personalized customer interactions across all channels, and you can do this even if you're currently running your business off your personal phone and your CRM is a spreadsheet. You don't need any tech experience, you just need to download their app and follow the easy setup. You can make this one change and your business will look as polished as a Fortune 500 company. Once you reach that point, you'll be more able to focus on closing and scaling. This is the year to level up your business and lower your costs. Go to my link, trynextiva.com/ConnorMcGrath, or use the link down below in the description to get 50% off of your plan. It's a great way to support this channel and you'll be doing yourself a favor. Thanks so much to Nextiva for sponsoring this video, and thank you for signing up. Now, the sea's been calling for a while. It's time to see what it wants. Today we're talking about video games again, specifically 3 games that not only put you in that terrifying and mesmerizing space that is an ocean, but further, invite you to seek out the danger yourself. There are plenty of ocean-based games I could have made this video about, but the 3 I'm talking about specifically have a gameplay loop that forces you into more and more dangerous encounters, driving you further and further into the darkness of your own volition. Before I describe these games though, let me describe this loop. All 3 of these games are what I might call resource management games, in that your primary focus the majority of the time is gathering and keeping control over various products, items, people, and currencies. Your success in whatever endeavor you're undertaking is founded solely on your ability to balance exploration with trade, or hunting, or however your in-game economy works. The loop of this gameplay typically goes this way. 1. You begin your game in some sort of safe, or at least mostly safe area, and slowly begin exploring and expanding your understanding of the area. 2. During this exploration, you find items or resources that you can collect, usually in a limited inventory. 3. You bring these resources back to your safe area, and are able to purchase or create upgrades and technology that will allow you to go further than before. 4. You continue to make excursions further and further away from your origin point, typically encountering more and more danger the further you go, but also more and more valuable materials. And 5, you continue this loop until you meet the win condition. Maybe you can already see exactly how this sort of system rewards boldness and putting yourself in uncomfortable situations. The situation at any given time can be explained as simply as, you need an item, that item is in a place, you're gonna have to deal with whatever else is in that place to get that item. Honestly, for a series of games that are about traversing the ocean in one way or another, this is a strangely accurate understanding of the actual perils of sea travel. Back when the best way to transport resources across the globe was via ship, there honestly was a real loop of loading supplies onto your ship and going through them as you transport valuables from point A to point B, resulting typically in payment that can be reinvested into more supplies and repairs to your ship. I've never been a captain in the 1800s, so I can't tell you exactly how accurate this process would be, but logistically, it makes sense to apply this pattern to games emulating this timer style. But beyond this system of retrieval are the specific ways each of these individual games add to their settings, using their environment to make the decision to venture into danger that much harder of a choice. The games go beyond just setting boundaries and objectives. Each of these stories of the sea know how to make you scared of the dark, and each does it in a different way. So let's talk about the first game, one I think most of you will be familiar with for one reason or another. Buckle up, because we're about to crash into the alien world of Subnautica. You're aboard the spaceship, the Aurora, when it encounters some kind of emergency and impacts violently into a strange ocean planet below. The official name of the planet is 4546b, but that's hard to remember, so for simplicity's sake, let's just pretend it's the planet itself that is called Subnautica. Subnautica is filled with life, and this point is clear only a few moments into the game. You were actually very lucky when your life pod landed. The place the game begins is in a zone called the Safe Shallows. Not only did you survive the crash, but you landed in one of the only places where you're more or less safe from massive predators. We're getting ahead of ourselves though. To start, as mentioned in that loop explanation earlier, you need to get your bearings. The first time you start swimming around in Subnautica, you're likely a little on edge. For all the apparent peace of the area, you're still in a completely unfamiliar environment, and whether you're thinking about things from your own point of view or the perspective of your player character, you still are uncertain about what exactly could appear around the corner, especially when night rolls around for the first time. But after a certain amount of time, you'll realize that it's simply too shallow for most predators to easily navigate here, that the biggest risk you'll have to face are small exploding fish or starvation, which sucks but don't exactly fill you with dread. You get comfortable with the space, maybe even start setting up a base there, but the whole time you're exploring this first area, an acknowledgement appears in the back of your head. From the safety of the shallows, you can still see the points where the sea floor drops sharply off into new, murky, and much deeper environments. Maybe you can put it off for a while, but subconsciously you know, eventually, you'll have to see what's out there. This is the first great trick Subnautica plays. It lets you remain comfortable for as long as you need, but over time, it also starts telling you things. Things like the fact that there's only so many resources here. When you start, the shallows are packed with copper and titanite, pretty much everything you'll need to get your first bit of supplies together. But those resources thin faster than you expect them to, and further, you start needing things that just aren't there. You start receiving distress calls from other life pods, further and further away from you, and each in more and more dangerous and concerning locations. Eventually, you have to move on. It's a gradual decline with Subnautica, at least if you're playing the traditional way. The game almost holds your hand. The next few areas you'll encounter still get a good amount of natural lighting. The wildlife gets a bit more rambunctious, but it's nothing you can't deal with, and for a while, you're still comfortable. The threat of the deep still lingers in your mind, but you're able to shake it off and find new upgrades and maybe even a way to access the ship. By this point in the game, you even have a few vehicles, which make getting around the safe area a breeze. It feels like this moment is the appropriate time to bring up the real appeal of Subnautica, which is that it's beautiful. We sometimes miss out on really taking in an environment when we're playing a game like this because we get stressed out and goal-oriented, but even the most dangerous areas of Subnautica are breathtaking, colored in neon with interesting flora and fauna, ambiently lit by the dancing light of the sun against the water's surface, or the glow of bioluminescence in a dark cave. It's the reason I keep coming back to this game. Mix that with the game's movement system, which lets you glide and maneuver in a way that produces even better perspectives on these environments, and it's no wonder why this game is so beloved. But honestly and truthfully, it's the call of the sea that really brings us back. That urge to get lost deep in some hidden space where gravity and weight and direction just mean different things. That, I think, is what guides most people into the deep, dark places later in Subnautica. But even if it didn't, even if you wanted to stay in the safe spots for your entire playthrough, it's just not sustainable. The same problem appears. Eventually, you need something from further out. Suddenly, you have to travel far away from safety to find what you need. Suddenly, it's dark in the places you're looking. Suddenly, it's deep. Suddenly, you're unsure again. I'm sure I don't need to tell you just how frightening making those first couple deep excursions are. You don't have to go far down before the natural light of the atmosphere becomes clouded and murky, hiding whatever's with you from sight. Your first encounter with a real sea monster, a leviathan, can go one of two ways. You'll either see it in the distance, your heart leaping into your throat as you become horribly familiar with the massive, twisting form, but not its true appearance, or you'll encounter it up close, springing nightmarishly from the darkness and devouring you terribly. Thalassophobia, aka the fear of deep water, has been done to death on YouTube, but not without reason. The main crux of every YouTuber's point tends to be, you have no idea what's down there and that's spooky, which I totally agree with. Not knowing is usually scary as hell. But what if you did know? Would that actually help? There's a point much later in Subnautica, around the end really, where your gameplay loop forces you into a place absolutely filled with monsters. There are necessary ingredients for you in this place, the final pieces of the game that will allow you to finally get off this planet, but as you travel there, your little AI helper friend gives you this warning.
Detecting multiple Leviathan-class life forms in the region. Are you certain whatever you're doing is worth it?
God, by this point, you're no weakling. You've encountered Leviathans, maybe even fought them, and you know what you're doing. But hearing this warning, so overt and clear and ominous, no matter what preparation you've done, you feel a bit of that original dread creep in. Every time you've plunged blindly into the depths, you've done so with the knowledge that there might be something waiting for you there, and that in itself is concerning. Now, you've been told expressly that something, multiple somethings, indeed are waiting for you down there. And guess what? You dive in anyway, because you have to. I started with Subnautica for a very specific reason, namely that it takes place beneath the waves as opposed to on top of them. For the other 2 games, we'll be looking at the feeling of traveling the sea like our ancestors, on a boat. I have a question for you. What is the most compelling part of Lovecraftian horror? The idea that there's something bigger than us who is unconcerned with our petty lives and beliefs? The acknowledgement of magical forces beyond our control? The fear of big monsters? No. It's the experience of being a fisherman. Now, I'm mostly joking, but in all fairness, fishermen, and most other jobs that have to do with being on the sea for a long time, are a weirdly big staple in Lovecraftian horror. I think it's the fact that they consistently take from the ocean for their and their community's livelihood, and that they return day in and day out to the unforgiving entity, and manage to survive, save for their shaken minds. Many a good tale of terror from the sea starts with a fisherman or a lighthouse. Dredge begins with both. A first glance at Dredge might trick you into thinking it's not a horror game at all, which, I mean, horror is in the eye of the beholder, and this game certainly isn't PT, but it's designed very simply, almost cutely. Before you do any sailing or fishing, the game is mostly made of looking at a small fishing village and talking to its strikingly designed inhabitants. The tone changes quickly, though, as you begin to internalize all the strange things they're saying. You're here on this island because you crashed into some rocks the night you got here. It seems unlikely, with the lighthouse towering above you, visible from just about anywhere on the sea, but you get the impression the sea doesn't play by the lighthouse's rules. Talking to the few villagers who live nearby, you learn that it's just as we've said before. The sea is a being itself, and here, it prefers to keep its secrets close to the chest. Everyone seems to know more than you, and in classic Lovecraftian fashion, they also do everything in their power not to share their secrets with an outsider such as yourself. The reason why might be because you aren't very trustworthy either. Not even our silent protagonist escapes the sullen fog of doubt. And that's before the sailing even starts. Dredge is a game all about fishing. The game takes place in the middle of the ocean, where a number of dangerous islands sit, each guarded by terrible monsters and sharp rocks. You navigate in a small fishing boat across both calm and stormy waters, seeking out more and more valuable fish, as well as certain trinkets for a mysterious employer who gives you strange powers as you bring more and more items to him. It is this employer who really pushes you into leaving your comfort zone. Much like in Subnautica, the initial area you explore is mostly safe, and though night is dangerous no matter where you are in Dredge, you feel comfortable near the lighthouse. But each individual trinket you bring your employer grants you access to new powers, which allow you a greater scope of exploration, a speed boost, a fast travel point. You realize you'll be able to find more and better fish if you keep bringing the trinkets back, which leads you further and further away from the safety of the Marrows and closer to the danger of the mystery lurking between these rocky islands. I'm a real sucker for a tangible upgrade system. Don't give me percentages and modifiers. I prefer a system with a limited scope of available actions with a high threshold for improvement. Dredge is a perfect example of this. All of the upgrading you do is to your boat and related to just 4 or 5 specific parts. Your engine, your rods, your nets, your light, and your hull, aka how much space you have and how much damage you can take. Each of these upgrades makes sense in how they'd be applied to your exploring and fishing experience as a whole, are clear in what is required to achieve them, and can be taken on flexibly and in any order, most of the time. In the beginning of the game, these upgrades are an incentive. Look how big your boat can get. Look at all the different rods you can purchase. But by the late game, once you've gotten away from safety and you've seen what's really out there, they're a necessity. It's kind of Sisyphean, if you think about it. You go further and further from home, seeking the upgrades to make your ship faster and your pockets deeper, and as you go further, you encounter tougher and tougher circumstances. Circumstances that you overcome with your upgrades, which you need to go even further out to get. That's what I mean when I say your upgrades become a necessity. You need them to explore, and so you explore to find them. Because you have to. Both Subnautica and Dredge, while taking place in fictional locations, manage to maintain a sort of familiar atmosphere despite their more alien moments. What I mean by this is that even though the safe shallows is filled with alien fish and plant life you've never seen, it still feels similar to swimming somewhere like a coral reef. Same with Dredge. The Gale Cliffs might not exist, but rocky coastal villages? For sure. Sunless Seas setting is a bit more on the wild side. As the name might imply, darkness plays a much bigger role in this game than the other two, mostly because the ocean in this game is underground. The in-game explanation for this is that London was stolen by bats. I know there are other games in this universe, and I haven't played them, and maybe they explain it a bit better, but I have no idea how to visualize that seriously. Which is really what the game is going for, I imagine. The game has a great and dark sense of humor. The people you meet manage to be vicious and hilarious all at once. The circumstances you encounter both horrible and bizarre, and it's through some careful and sneaky design that Sunless Sea numbs you to these things, almost normalizing them, making you a cog in this nightmarish economy. But we're getting ahead of ourselves. There are a lot of similarities between Sunless Sea and Dredge's gameplay. Both center mostly around taking a boat out from one safe port into a dangerous seascape, searching for valuables and avoiding sea monsters. But what Dredge doesn't have is a tricky economy. In Dredge, fish equals money, and money equals upgrades, and also wreckage equals materials, and materials also equals upgrades. It's a simple system, and it serves the game better for it. But Sunless Sea is asking for a little bit more thought. Sunless Sea is a roguelite, albeit a pretty long and open-ended one. There are multiple win conditions for you to choose from, multiple strategies to employ, and a seemingly endless amount of bizarre ways to go about taking on each run. But the best explanation of its material that I can give you is that there are a number of different islands around you, each holding different resources and quest lines that you jump from one to another as you seek out whatever it is you're seeking out, usually money to one degree or another. The locations of each of the islands are hidden unless you take action to prevent this, and your knowledge of their placement and the most effective routes to take between them is your most valuable asset while playing. This is what I mean when I say it requires a bit more thought from you. Dredge is a pretty clear order of events for you to follow in its time, though it doesn't exactly trap you into it. Sunless Sea has no order. Not in-game, of course. However, as mentioned earlier, all of these games are resource management games to one degree or another, but none so much as this one. It takes both fuel to power your ship and food to feed your crew as you make your way through the shadowy depths of Sunless Sea. Your crew will become more and more agitated the longer they're in the dark, but using your light burns fuel quicker and it doesn't even fully prevent a growth in fear. What this means is that, sure, you can technically go anywhere, but will you survive the trip? Well, if you don't have a plan, no. You move so slowly in Sunless Sea, even after upgrades, that it's in the spaces between each island, especially the long ones or the times when you're searching aimlessly through the blackness for a new space, that you really feel the atmosphere of this cavernous ocean. The way the water splashes gently all around you, the way that the echoes or noises emanating from far, far away become warped on the rocky dome and come back to you, the way you have to constantly scan for and avoid sea monsters and pirates. You feel all at once on edge and stressed, constantly eyeing your different falling meters, but also relaxed, meditating in a calm yet dangerous space. There are times when you're sailing that you feel at peace, and maybe even the scratchings of that siren they call the spirit of adventure. And that's where the call comes, that call of the sea. Once you have a few quests done and a bit of money under your belt, you begin to realize, 1, how much weaker you are than some of the other people and things out here, and 2, how much more lucrative each of your runs could be if you had more places to go and more ways to make money. Every time you leave the port of your primary city, you're committing to a long, arduous, and potentially dangerous excursion. Wouldn't it be better if you could stay out for longer on each trip, gather even more resources, and make even more money? The first time you do it successfully and you can suddenly upgrade your ship, you realize how foolish it is to try and stay near safety. The best, most valuable, and exotic and strange items all seem to come from the furthest away from where you start. You need to keep exploring, you need to reach your goal, and so you keep heading out, looking for more islands, stories, and economies to become a part of. Because you have to. I love games about the ocean, potentially because I live so far away from one. As I've mentioned in other videos, I'm from Colorado, which is about as landlocked as you can get, so when a quality game about exploring the sea comes out, I am all over it. But what I love specifically about these games is how personal your experiences with them become. Like many of my favorite games, things like Breath of the Wild and Prey, your experiences with these games are made up of a bunch of small moments that you can find on your own and react to naturally. The Call of the Sea is a call to discovery, to adventure, but what adventure is improved by knowing what's at the end? These games understand what it feels like to set off against uncertain odds, to go where danger and mystery drift with the mist, not because it makes sense, not because it's our only option, but just because we have to.